Yeah, so I think Reinforce has done a pretty I've only seen like one of his videos. It seemed pretty interesting. Seemed like he had a pretty good grasp of the game. I mean, obviously, he's played a lot of the game before, but you know, I think good respect here. So
right, to get my this is sort of where Washington Justice is struggling, in my opinion. Like anecdotally, like Mag, when he's forced to make a decision, and proactive decision, that's usually when he struggles, can't make the right one. And Washington Justice, they also didn't make the best compositional switches, in my opinion. So just quick thoughts on like how this kind of these compositional breakdowns work, in my opinion. So again, this is macro, pretty macro, but in terms of speed of tank picks, I mean, first is going to be like Doomfist, very rapid. Then we have like Winston, and then we're gonna have Zarya. So I'll just try to quickly explain, of course. So like Doomfist, of course, like has the most mobility, the less mitigation for the rest of his team, which makes him a very quick hero. In that, you know, fights are decided very quickly. You have to dive in fast. You can't
Not
take too much damage. It's like split-second stuff, right? Some teams, like the Atlanta Rein, they've tried to play a bit slower at times.
I'll clarify my comments once he finishes. Because there's a very fundamental misunderstanding with what fast and slow means. I want to kind of talk about that a little bit.
But Atlanta have been a bit exposed playing a bit slower Doomfist by these Winston compositions, because Winston compositions win out when you play a bit slower than the Doomfist.
He's right,
and
but
this
not
sort of carries on
exactly
onto the Zarya pick as well. So where a Winston pick is faster than a Doomfist kind of pick, it's Winston is slower than a Doomfist. Winston is slower. Oh my god, sorry guys. Winston is slower than a Doomfist pick, because again, you have the shield bubble, right? You have the Winston bubble, so that's more mitigation for your team, so you can play slower than a Doomfist that doesn't have any kind of mitigation for his team. Power block doesn't really count. Zarya, on the other hand, has two bubbles, and more poke damage than Winston, so you can inherently play slower as a Zarya, because you have like more poke damage and you have two kinds of bubbles, two kinds of protection. So it forces the Winston to make a move, because eventually the Winston will get poked so much that either you'll have to like engage or disengage, because you can't just stand around and take damage as a Winston, right? So it forces the Winston to make a move, and this is sort of what I anecdotally think that Mag has struggled with. So when facing this composition by the Boston Uprising, Zarya and Reaper, what you really want to do to try to beat this composition is bait out their abilities.
Okay, so before we start talking about the matchup, let's talk a little bit about like what speed means in Overwatch. So I think it's important to understand, like, let's just use a comparison that he used. So fast and slow can definitely be a good way of describing how fast you want the actual brawl phase to happen. But I think it's important to understand that when we're talking about Doomfist as a fast hero, what we mean by that is Doomfist provides literally, I mean, really almost next to no value, and then provides a lot of value on his cooldowns, and then no value, and then a lot of value on his cooldowns, and then very low, not no value, but very low value, right? So his cooldown cycle happens rapidly, because slam and punch are all he's waiting for. He's not waiting for a bubble, he's just waiting for slam and punch, and punch is basically no cooldown at all, and slam is not near as long as something like a bubble. In addition, his health pool is smaller and his hitbox is smaller, and he often, with his abilities, has ways of regenerating health, which means that his cycles can be a lot faster than, say, Winston. He can go in and out over and over and over again. Now let's actually compare that to a Winston. Okay, so like let's also say that like Doomfist provides a little bit of value because he can do things like M1, right? So his value isn't 0 during these neutral stages. Now Winston, in terms of his raw direct pressure, not his is a little lower than Doomfist, right? So he's a little lower than Doomfist. He can't shoot, he can't do a lot of these things, but when he does go in with jump, or even just with bubble, let's say he walks in and bubbles, his value is unbelievably high, right? So like you're talking about, right? And it lasts a little longer too, right? So you're talking about a really, really, really high burst of value with bubble. I mean, it's maybe the most powerful tank cooldown in the game is Winston bubble. It's something that when it's up, it's like unbelievably powerful if it's well used by the Winston comp. But then the problem is that it's such a long cooldown that once that bubble's down, the Winston's value does drop a lot. And it drops for longer than the Doomfist because it's a longer cooldown, right? So maybe this isn't a perfect representation, but I think you guys kind of get what I'm talking about here. You see how these, like, maybe by the time the Winston has gone in for his 3rd cycle, the Doomfist has already done 4 cycles. So it's rapid, fast cycles, burst values. The Doomfist is in, that's our opportunity to peak. That's our opportunity to take space because he's baiting attention, then he's out, and right in and out and out. Whereas a Winston, is not necessarily faster, but when he's in, he's really, really, really in. So it's not about fast or slow. If you're playing a Doomfist composition, you could take a slow fight and just have your Doomfist do these pressure cycles over and over and over again while your DPS take greedy angles. Or you can have your Doomfist going really hard, really fast, all in, and everybody go in all in with him. But then, if you were to play something like that, ironically, you could even argue that Winston might even be the quote-unquote faster team, or the faster composition if you were to all in, because an all-inning Winston reaches a higher peak than an all-inning Doomfist. Do you guys kind of see what I'm saying? Now, obviously, Power Punch changes things a little bit here, but that's why it's really dangerous to say things like, oh, it's a faster style. What does that mean? Does it mean that the longer the fight goes on, the Winston comp is worse, or that the Doomfist comp is worse? Because that's not necessarily true. Reinhardt would be a little bit more consistent, and that's where we're going to draw in Zarya here. So Zarya is completely different. So Zarya is obviously reliant on her 2 bubble cooldowns, but they're frequently available. And the difference between Doomfist and Reinhardt and Zarya is Doomfist can click a little bit, but Zarya can click a lot. Zarya doesn't do a ton of damage, not Sigma level damage, but Zarya compared to Winston or Doomfist does a lot more damage. And her cycles are a little bit faster. So there's bubble, 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 right? That's kind of what we're looking at with Zarya. To where her peak, a peak Zarya, even with both bubbles, is not as valuable as a Winston during those few seconds. But before the bubbles, after the bubbles, the Zarya is going to get her bubbles back faster than Winston is. And also, she's doing stuff here, whereas the Winston is doing almost nothing and the Doomfist is doing very little because she can shoot. She can do damage. So that's the way of looking at things. That's the way of looking at things. When you say the Zarya composition needs to play slower, that's not necessarily true. It can mean that you build energy. That's true, giving yourself a little bit of time to build energy. But it's more about the Zarya composition is more focused on playing when the Winston comp is weak, and the Winston comp is more about playing when they're strong. In other words, if you're a Zarya composition, you're very much focused on whether this monkey has bubble or not. Everybody plays around whether this monkey has bubble or not. When the monkey doesn't have bubble, you're winning. Nice job. When the monkey does have bubble, you're just surviving. When the monkey doesn't have bubble again, if he has used it, now we're winning again. And you need to play to strengthen these points here and find some way to win, get space or get picks here, and you need to find a way to survive here. That's the key. That's the key. Does that make sense, guys? With Reinhardt, it's similar to Zarya, but I would go as far to say with Reinhardt, it might even be something like this, right? Maybe there's a little dips with Fire Strike, where his value is consistently very high because he's not very cool and reliant. Maybe just 10. That's really all he's wearing. But he also doesn't have anywhere near the peaks that a Winston does. Okay? Okay. So then the question is not about which team plays faster, outside of maybe the Zarya comp wants to build energy, but it's about, will Boston be able to get enough value before Mag uses bubble and after Mag uses bubble? That's the key. Hey, Alakon.
Yo.
How's the Doomfist, man? Whereas Justice need to find a lot of value with Winston bubble, otherwise they will lose. Because the Zarya composition is better before and better after. The funny thing is, chat, this isn't new to Overwatch, okay? Not only is this not new to Overwatch, but this isn't new to Overwatch League by any stretch of means. I don't know what I'm saying. But actually, this is not the first time that Dive has been beaten by a Zarya comp that was a little bit easier, okay? Maybe not a little bit easier, but that's my impression anyway. So if you consider Zarya Hog, do you guys remember Zarya Hog meta, right? Who doesn't, right? The Ashe, Mercy, Ana, all that kind of stuff. The Zarya Hog, when Hog was busted, it functioned the exact same way, where the Zarya composition with the Hog Hook, with the Ashe damage boost, all that kind of stuff, had the opportunity to get picks on the Dive comp before the fight started, had the opportunity to survive the dive with bubbles, vape, sleep dart, nade. And then after the dive had used cooldowns, they were once again strong again because Hog could shoot people. Zarya now was charged and could shoot people, and Ashe could continue shooting people as well. So back in those days, even like teams were not as good as Dive. So they really struggled versus the Zarya Hog composition, which is why you saw a lot of teams go into the Zarya Hog composition, because if you weren't getting big value on your initial dives and taking big space, then the Zarya Hog could kill you before they kill you after bubble. It's the same thing. There's the power spike of the Winston comp is very high, but you must get value on the Winston bubble, otherwise you're gonna have a hard time. Now, how you get value out of Winston bubble could be diving a soldier, splitting off their Zarya, diving the Ana. There's a lot of things you can do with a Winston dive, and I don't really want to go into the details, but that's what we're looking for.
What you really want to do to try to beat this composition is bait out their abilities.
That's true. So while this composition is more paying attention to Winston bubble than this team is, this team would still really like to force one Zarya bubble and then dive afterwards if they can. Maybe they get a heal station. Maybe they get nade. Maybe they get amp. Maybe they see wraith. That's a great one. And then dive afterwards. So Justice might even use some, maybe get poked down a little bit, but maybe they're like, you know what? We'll let you guys shoot us a little bit, but if we can get one of these cooldowns out and then dive afterwards, we'll be really happy. Which is why, to me, it's a little... Okay, I won't say anything more. I'm just gonna let it play.
So how does this match? If you go in now with this faster Winston pick, like if you just dive in, there's going to be a problem because like there's going to be 2 Zarya bubbles. So if you were trying to focusing down the Ana, it'll be really hard because the Ana will get so much protection from the Zarya that it'll take time.
It's true. So now, even though the Winston comp is really strong during this burst, this comp does have ways of surviving the dive, which means that you would love, before you use your bubble, to try and force one of these out, or one of these cooldowns out.
Eventually, I mean, the soldier is going to kill your tracer, the reaper is going to kill your Winston, and like you can't do it fast enough. So you need to bait some Zarya bubbles out. Secondly, you want to try to get reaper wraith form out. Because, I mean, you can try to focus on the Reaper, but it'll get Zarya bubbles. And also, if there are no Zarya bubbles onto the Reaper, you can still Wraith form and get away. So there's so much mitigation here in terms of like defensive cooldowns that in order for this composition with a Tracer, with a Reaper, with a Winston to like capitalize and like beat this composition out, you need to get those cooldowns out. The problem is that Tracer isn't really good at putting pressure on this composition. As a Tracer, like... you want to get in the back line, like secure a kill on the Ana, but there's Zarya bubbles there. You can't really harass a Zarya, to get a bubble.
That's true. So Tracer is actually interesting because especially since her nerf, she struggles to early force cooldowns. In other words, I can't really just go in backline as Tracer and just carefully shoot and force a bubble. I will be very good when my Winston hard commits because I'm a great dive hero, but I'm not a hero that's able to early force, we're taking a lot of damage, therefore we have to use the bubble, or taking a lot of damage, therefore we have to use amp, or if you're taking a lot of damage, we have to use that. So that's a good point by Reinforce.
Bubble out. The healing from the Ana is going to be there, the self bubbles, etc. And by that time, you probably invested a recall. You have to disengage. You have to get healed by your Ana. The consistent pressure isn't there compared to, for example, like a soldier. And we'll see them swap over to a soldier later. As for the Reaper pick, again, like. You need to deal with the defensive Wraith form and the Zarya bubble, because by the time you get down those cooldowns, you, happy as a Reaper, you're not going to have a Zarya bubble. Your Winston shield is probably going to be dead, and so there's a way shorter lifespan on the Washington Justice composition in how much damage they can mitigate and how much time they have to get through all these defensive cooldowns, the Zarya bubble, the Reaper, etc.
So the important thing here to note, though, is that why I agree with everything that he said here, why I gave such a big caveat at the beginning, is because it's too simplistic to say that this composition just needs to go in right now. What they could do is they could go, okay, we're going to take an angle here with our Tracer, and then our Winston's going to play underneath, and then our Reaper's going to play up in here and maybe poke out a little bit and try not to get his Wraith Force, and our Ana's going to be looking for an angle here, and our Lucifer's going to be looking for boop. So they could play it slow, but just as long as they're not getting shot too much. So they can play it slow, avoiding damage, scouting for maybe they force a cooldown on this, or maybe Punk just messes up and bubbles this, or maybe Crimzo gets shot a couple times by Krillin and then has to nade himself. That's the kind of thing that you're looking for, but you don't have to be engaged all the way to go. You don't have to dive. We have to dive now. No, you need to dive. When you do commit, you commit hard, but you're waiting for and looking for opportunities for you to commit hard on. I hope that distinction is very clear, because that's very important.
See this play out in action. So Mag's going to drop his Winston bubbles relatively quickly. This first fight is actually going to win. Ignore that. They're actually just going to run. This first
now,
fight is
can you guys try and tell me
or
guess
going to drop his Winston bubbles relatively quickly. This first fight.
Why did they win this first fight? Now they've sieved bubble.
Going to win.
They've traded for Wraith. But look at Mag's HP. So they forced a bubble. They forced Wraith, but Mag still has not bubbled yet. Mag is still not taking damage. They land the sleep. Mag is still not taking damage. Mag is still not taking damage.
To run over this.
They just run them over. So my question is, chat, and the really important question here is why is Mag not taking damage? And I think there's two reasons why. Reaper doesn't do anything, right? I think Reaper gets Wraith, but I think you have to kind of consider, would it have been better for our Bubble Reaper to shoot Mag and Force Bubble, or would it have been better for Bubble Reaper to shoot Backline? You guys have to think about that one, okay? And then my other question is, where's Victoria? Because you're very reliant on your soldier damage to pressure the monkey early and to pressure these guys early so that before they get to Winston Bubble, they're weak. Unfortunately, I don't even know where Victoria is. I'm not sure if he's stacked inside backline, but the nature of this map makes it kind of hard for Soldier to get early pressure. So we've seen Valentine not get much done. We've seen Victoria not get much done in the early poke phase. So that means Matt could literally just walk right on in. So normally remember the graph with Zarya, where we saw this, right? And Winston's down here, right? Well, this should have been where they were better. Can you guys see that? I don't know if you guys can see that. But this section here is where the Zarya comp should have been able to put more pressure early on before they had to start using bubbles, before they had to use bubbles, but they didn't do it. They didn't do it. And that's where you start to get to the micro of the composition about, okay, what's the most value that we can get from our bubbles? What's the best target for our Reaper to go on? What's the best way to use on and aid? How should our soldier position? And so you know what you want to do with the composition, but you don't know how you use the individual pieces to get to that result. And that's where micro comes in. And I think that's where Boston messed up this first fight.
Ignore that. Actually, just going to run over this. Sorry, but we ignore these fights because it's not what I'm
actually check to see if we got Overwatch League coming on. Okay, not yet. We'll go a little bit longer.
I only like being right.
But I honestly think that what you've already have learned from this VOD already, from between what Reinforces said and what I've said, I think you guys will be in a much better position to watch any Reaper or Winston versus Zarya matchup, and you'll understand it better. Look at early fight. How much value does that Reaper get? How much value does that soldier get versus the Winston? And then win the Winston bubble, how much value do they get out of that Winston bubble? And I'm not going to give you I'm not even going to give you guys the answers to those micro questions. I think you'll be able to figure some of them out yourself, I think.
By the way, Crimson is a sick bionade here. Sick bionates. A lot of standout individual performances here by Boston Uprising, Twin Oasis. So we'll go through that pretty quickly. So let's see this setup by the Washington Justice and how they try to deal with all this mitigation. Sorry about that. So they're standing here by the point. They're poking, like they're chilling around. Boston Uprising are slowly going to walk up towards the point. It's another nice bio from Crimso, and he's going to hit a lot of these, so be prepared for a lot of bios. Valentine's.
Now, he had to use Bionade for this, but what have we seen so far? We've seen Mag have to give up space because Crimso hit him with a nade, and we've seen Happy get his shift forced early on. So if you're Boston, yeah, you had to use a nade for it, but you've done some good work early in the fight before you've seen Winston bubble. That's what we want, yes?
Starts poking Happy, forces out the Wraith form. Washington has to disengage. Mag is going to be forced to disengage as well, so they're forcing out Washington Justice cooldowns here.
Now they commit, but is the committal very good? No, they've not even had... Boston's not even used the bubble. This is their first bubble.
There's the bubble.
Bubble on Reaper on Mag. Can Mag commit? Did Washington Justice get value, a big spike in value, a big dive out of this bubble? No, they didn't.
From Mag, there's a star bubble into Valentine.
And as bad as this feels for Washington now, it's about to get a lot worse because Boston still has bubble. They still have Wraith. They still have sleep. They still have healing station and soldier damage. And Washington just used their most important 2 cooldowns.
Mag will be forced to disengage. And so you'll see slowly but surely, this is essentially...
And now do you see Boston? What are they doing now? Are they scared anymore?
Like Winston versus Doomfist, the way we saw Washington play Atlanta last week, where Washington just sit back, they wait for the Doomfist to go in, and then they capitalize off that, right? But in this case, the Winston is the equivalent of the Doomfist from last week. The Winston has to make the first move because you have less mitigation. And so the Zarya is happy to just slowly walk forward, poke a little bit.
The only reason she poke a little bit conservatively, but then did you see how once they saw Winston bubble, they used that as an impetus to push forward and take space, especially considering they didn't have to use a single cooldown to peel off the Winston dive.
poke a little bit.
Besides Nate.
And like force the Washington Justice to make a move. But Washington, they're not good at finding these pressures. They're not good at finding these defensive cooldowns out and then capitalize on it. That's not what they do. That's not their expertise. They like to play slower. Again, Happy goes down here, but you see this.
So this is where I disagree a little bit. I don't think necessarily Washington likes to play slower. I mean, that's very premature for me to say because I haven't seen all of this match. But it looked like, for me, at least that fight in particular, where Justice don't set up well, so they get their cooldowns forced early by the Wraith, I mean. And then when they did commit, they did not commit well. Mag did not get a very good bubble. Mag did not get a lot of damage. Krillin was not able to land an anti-nade off of his monkey dive. Decay was not diving with Mag at the same time. Decay actually went too early, got cleared out, then Mag goes in afterwards, so that the dive was very weak. Happy was not involved in the dive. Decay was not involved in the dive. Krillin was not involved in the dive. So Mag walks in, maybe his bubble was okay, but he's literally 1v5ing at that point.
Defensive bubble by Mag.
That's the problem. If you use your monkey bubble and you don't get anything done with it, you're going to lose.
Mag. Actually, we do not. Like this defensive bubble by Mag. Like, what does this
exactly, Mentos?
do for your team? This does nothing for your team. You need to use this.
I mean, the reason that this is being used like this is because he's pre-poked out. Look at what happens directly
here. You see this defensive bubble by Mag? Good at finding these defensive cooldowns out and then capitalize on it. That's not what they do. That's not their expertise. They like to play slow.
Mag is just bubbling for his life. He's just getting shot by the enemy soldier, it looks like. So he has to bubble himself. At this point, the fight's already lost. I mean, maybe you could argue that Mag maybe can drop here and zap a little bit with this bubble at the same time, but it's already pretty much lost at this point.
Again, Happy goes down here, but you see this defensive bubble by
Thank
Mag.
you, 7C. We'll finish this little discussion, then I'll probably call it.
Like this defensive bubble by Mag. Like, what does this do for your team? This does nothing for your team. You need to use this offensively. You need to get these cooldowns out and then like go quick. Because otherwise what's going to happen is Valentine's Reaper and the defensive cooldowns and the poke damage from the Zarya is just going to overrun you. And this solar as well. There's so much more poke on this composition.
And they're going to keep going because there's nothing that Justice has anymore.
Justice, therefore, they're just disengaging. They're just backing off.
Okay, so I am going to call it there because it looks like Overwatch League. Yeah, Overwatch League is starting. So you guys go enjoy that. Interesting video. I think Reinforce has some really good thoughts there. I had some clarifications that I think that need to be made with a little bit of how he was explaining things. I think that it could be a little better. But I encourage you guys with what you know now to go forth and see if you can apply some of that. See if you can apply some of that. Like now what you know.